What is up, people of the Snyderverse? Welcome to a brand new DCEU update video, because today we're going to be talking about Supergirl after the Snyder stuff. But first, Vanity Fair went in quite deep with Zack Snyder, and not only did we get some new photos that you're seeing on screen right now out of it, and we'll discuss those because we got yet another look at Jared Leto's Joker. We get his thoughts on the past few years of what was actually going on when Joss Whedon was brought in, along with comments about Jeff Johns. We get an anonymous Warner Brothers executive calling the Justice League version that they actually got by the end of it a piece of shit, but nobody really wanted to own up to it. Like, this interview goes in quite deep. We even get some original story ideas for Bruce kind of thirsting after Lois Lane, believe it or not, which is a real wild way to imagine how things could have gone. And then, of course, I want to talk about Supergirl, the new Supergirl casting coming to the Flashpoint movie in the DCU from here on out, which is interesting because we all heard about Supergirl quite a long time ago, and now finally there's a name to the face. So go ahead and like this video if you're enjoying the Snyder Cut updates, the movie updates, or whatever, and make sure you subscribe, of course, if you're not subscribed, because a large amount of the audience isn't actually subscribed, but maybe today is the day that you click that button. But first of all, let's go over the basics. Let's go over the new photos that this article did present. And starting off, we have Ray Fisher's Cyborg. It seems to be the same location as where we had Batman looking at Joker, or Joker sat down in that kind of long hallway corridor-esque room. And then we have a good old image of Ben Affleck's Batman himself, still maintaining the black and white style here. We have this woman here who I have never heard of before. Don't know who she is. And then, of course, we have Jesus Christ himself. Jared Leto. No, really. It doesn't cease to surprise me what things pop out with this. Here we can see the kind of surgical gown. We see the surgical mask attached. A lot of people are commenting saying, the surgical mask is right there, Boba, because in my previous breakdown, when we first saw the actual first looks of Joker, I couldn't actually spot that. It blended in. But yeah, he's in kind of like a surgeon-y kind of thing. What that reminds me of is, you know, let's just say Joker did crawl out of Arkham and survived somehow up until the nightmare sequence in that premonition of Bruce Wayne's. It does make sense in the way that it'd be potentially one of these gowns with the kind of doctor's purpley-esque kind of gloves. As for how he got a crown of thorns there, what? I don't really understand it. I mean, I do understand probably why it's there. Snyder doesn't exactly try and stray away from any kind of biblical imagery in his films. A lot with Superman, Lex Luthor, with his speeches in the movies. God versus man, day versus night. Or like the upside down painting he had in his father's office. I can't remember. You get the vibes I'm going with here. As for me actually analyzing the look of Jared Leto here, you've all heard me say it before. I think it's a massive upgrade, but this image doesn't really offer anything substantially new in terms of stuff that I can break down, other than why the heck is he? I don't know. It's the Joker, okay? I assume that he's wearing a crown of thorns in the actual Snyder Cut at some point, unless this is really just for background photos that Zack decided to take for himself, because we all know he likes to take a lot of photos of his own work and whatnot. But as I said, there's some key snippets out of this article I wanted to go over, just because it's interesting hearing Zack Snyder himself really, without any threshold, just talk about it. Just really talk about it. And it's stuff that we all already kind of know about, but it's just, it kind of has that raw filter over it when you hear it being spoke about in a Vanity Fair piece. Because as I said, this piece, it went in quite deep. But aside from the kind of political talk, we will get into the Batman thirsting after Lois, believe it or not, that I said we would. And then Supergirl. So this bit is interesting here because part of the article says, reports that Snyder himself asked Whedon for help were false. Johns, one of the studio-appointed babysitters, had been planning a Batgirl movie with Whedon. And Snyder and others say that Johns recruited him to do rewrites for Justice League. John's representatives didn't respond to a request for comment. Once again, Snyder was gracious and even hopeful, saying with all of that going on, I thought maybe he could write some cool scenes. I thought that would be fun. But then, alas, we all kind of knew how that went. It wasn't just a couple of rewrites for a few cool scenes that Snyder was, you know, innocently and understandably so hopeful about. It's just, as he says here, I thought that would be fun. Maybe write some cool scenes. It turned into a proper resculpture of everything. And you know what makes it baffling to, I think, not just me, but me kind of representing fans, I suppose, within this voice or whatever I'm conjuring right now. But it's just we all kind of knew it, and the studio knew it as well, because this part of the article is also very interesting, as I teased in the intro, saying Whedon rewrote and reshot about 3 quarters of Justice League, from what Snyder can gather. When fans ask him about the details of the movie that bears his name, he usually has no idea what they're talking about, and that's because he hasn't seen the theatrical cut. Worst of all, for Warner Brothers, Whedon didn't exactly save the movie. Quote unquote, when we got to see what Joss actually did, it was stupefying, says a studio executive who requested anonymity. The robber on the rooftop, so goofy and awful. The Russian family, so useless and pointless. Everyone knew it. It was so awkward because nobody wanted to admit what a piece of shit it was. That is coming from an anonymous Warner Brothers studio executive right there. Ladies and gentlemen, you heard it there. It was so awkward because nobody wanted to admit what a piece of shit it was. Ah, man, if this was tea, it would be fitting, but it's coffee, but I'm going to take my sip anyway. And to add more tea to the kind of Warner Brothers versus Snyder, I guess you could say, yeah, which is accurate, because he did have an uphill battle with this, no doubt, and obviously the fandom really helped out. But this part of the article talks about the whole releasing of the Snyder Cut in its infancy, like when Warner Brothers were kind of on board to do it, but didn't really want to, I guess, give the resources to it that it required. So this goes on to say, initially, says Snyder, Warner Brothers just wanted to release the raw footage on his laptop, because that's what he walked away from originally from the Whedon cut. Like, he took his laptop, as we mentioned earlier, and it had the Snyder Cut around 4 hours on it. It was completely not worked on, really, other than the point you got it up to. But Warner Brothers would just, like, release the raw footage on your laptop. And he says, I was like, that's a no. That's a hard no. And they're like, but why? You can just put up the rough cut. Snyder didn't trust their motivations. I go, here's why. 3 reasons. 1, you'll get the internet off your back, which is probably your main reason for wanting to do this. 2, you'll get to feel vindicated for making things right, I guess, on some level. And then 3, you get a shitty version of the movie that you can just point at and go, see, it's not that good anyway. So maybe I was right. I was like, no chance. I would rather just have the Snyder Cut be a mythical unicorn for all time. And I completely get what he's saying there. That's very interesting, especially looking at the mindsets of Zack Snyder here talk about this and Warner Brothers perspectives, and also Warner Brothers approach in general. It does make me think, and can't help but think, look, why Warner Brothers wouldn't you just be like, hey, here's some money from the get-go, finish your cut? No, it does seem like they just wanted to, hey, release it, we'll let you release it officially, and that's that. If it's bad and it kind of looks bad because it's unfinished, of which it is, then we get to say, I told you so. It just doesn't make sense. Why? I don't thank God that Snyder put up such a hard no to that and saying that he would rather it be a unicorn till the end of time than rather just release it unfinished. He deserved to have it finished. I mean, he had the movie taken from him and Whedonized. And the studio execs knew how shit it was. It's just, they obviously just were so done with this, and they were just hoping that the Snyder would just be like, hey, can you just release it? Is that good enough? But here's an interesting idea Snyder had for like a romance between Ben Affleck's Bruce Wayne and Amy Adams' Lois Lane, who was mourning Superman's death in the previous film. So quote unquote here, the intention was that Bruce fell in love with Lois and then realized that the only way to save the world was to bring Superman back to life, says Snyder. So he had this insane conflict because Lois, of course, was still in love with Superman. And we had this beautiful speech where Bruce said to Alfred, I never had a life outside the cave. I never imagined a world for me beyond this. But this woman makes me think that if I can get this group of gods together, then my job is done. I can quit. I can stop. And then, of course, that doesn't work out for him. And ultimately, the studio said no to that idea. I don't really like it overall, but one thing I would say is I kind of really respect it. Like, I do understand how that could make Bruce a certain way. I also think it's amazing the line we got from Bruce to Alfred here in this preview, where he says, I've never had a life outside this cave. I never imagined a world for me beyond this, but this woman makes me think that if I can get a group of gods together, then my job is done. I could quit. Like, so Lois gave him just kind of hope for something other than Batman. And don't forget, I don't blame Bruce Wayne in this universe saying that because of he is already a veteran Bruce Wayne. He is already, for all intents and purposes, kind of that Dark Knight Returns Bruce Wayne, where we saw him in BVS, and Justice League is just going to wear him even thinner. So after Superman died, it's interesting to think that Snyder wanted to try and put a romance there. I don't know if Lois would have ever have gone for it, but it probably would have been more of a creepy thing from Bruce. Like, she may never feel romantic for him, but he looks at her as somebody who's inspiring to him. Not just romantically, he likes her, but I think he's just in awe of her, maybe, and she motivates him to, well, as the lines say here, maybe like his job can be done if he can pull all of this off. Another thing is, this just makes the whole kind of cut in a nightmare where he just gets lasered by Superman in a whole different light, a whole different context. Now we know what really happened between Superman and Bruce. Lastly, very quickly, guys, there's not too much to say here as well, but I wanted to give my thoughts on the new Supergirl. The new Supergirl we have in the DC cinematic universe. So here we have exclusive, the young and the restless daytime Emmy nominee Sasha Calle has scored the featured role of DC Universe's new Supergirl. The Boston MA-born Colombian actress is the first Latina Supergirl ever in DC and was chosen from more than 425 actresses who auditioned. She will make a debut in Warner Bros. The Flash, which is going to be, as we all know, this big cluster F of a Flashpoint movie with a very original approach, believe it or not. It's not actually to reflect the source material that much, which makes all of this news very interesting for what they're really going to do in that. So the Flash director Andy Muschietti watched all of the auditions, and I hear, along with DC Films boss Walter Hamada and the producers, was blown away by the actress's toughness and vulnerability that she brought to the role. I saw more than 400 auditions. The talent pool was truly amazing, and it was very hard to make a decision, but we finally found an actress who was destined to play this role, said Muschietti. Now that is more or less it. I'm sure you've seen the video going around on the internet of her finding out that she got the Supergirl role from like a Zoom call between her and Andy, and he pulls like Superman's suit saying, "You need something like this," and she just freaked out. One thing I'll say is I think this is excellent. I have absolutely no gripes or quarrels with this representation. I think it's fantastic. I think she's badass. I just did a little bit of digging into her. I haven't seen her in anything personally, but she seems like a cool person, and like, for all intents and purposes, why wouldn't I give her a go to play Supergirl? Like, I'm actually kind of really looking forward to seeing the DCEU's Supergirl, which is being birthed out of this Flashpoint movie, where so many things are going to be... Oh man, this is going to paint a whole new tapestry for, like, not just DCEU, but DC TV, DC everything. DC live action everything. That's what you need to really come to terms with this Flashpoint movie. It's going to be so different, but I think it also has the capacity to be so different, but in such a fantastic way. Bottom line, new Supergirl, I think she looks great. I think she will hopefully be great, but I would love to know your thoughts on this. I'm sure they will dye her hair, just like Melissa Benoist has had to have had her hair dyed as well. But that is mainly everything I wanted to cover in this video, guys. So as I said, check out that Vanity Fair article to get some more little kind of tidbits on Snyder's thoughts about the whole process behind his Justice League. But I would also just love to know your thoughts about that frickin' Jesus Christ Joker, on top of the Warner Brothers tea, if you will, between Snyder and the studio, and of course the romance between Lois and Batman. But this has been another edition of the Boba Blabber session, so if you did enjoy it this much, I would really appreciate a thumbs up on the video if you just click that with your phone on your mobile device or your mouse on your computer. But yeah, click the links in the top pinned comment to follow me on social media like Twitter, my Discord server. And yeah, I just thank you so much for the support, everyone. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a lovely rest of your day. And I'll see you people of the Snyderverse in the next video. Goodbye.